Welcome, everybody, to this interview and conversation with Michael Sandel. Uh, he's a very, very well-known moral philosopher. He teaches government theory at Harvard University Law School, and he has been teaching to tens of millions of people through television, YouTube, and other means about justice, the word that he has helped us understand by showing how our daily life and normal life is full of social dilemmas that we should deal with, that he is able to show how to do this in a deep and concerned and sensible way. He has been writing about neoliberalism since the 80s, and he's been criticizing that kind of approach since then. In the 40 years of neoliberal domain, has been one of the voices that always showed another way of thinking. Now he is out also in Italy with Feltrinelli translation of his last book, The Tyranny of Merit. You can see it here, but and he is talking about a very controversial and interesting topic. Meritocracy and the tyranny of merit is really a way of putting the problem of how we live in a very interesting and problematic way. Of course, we are going to start with Professor Sandel explaining what he thinks about meritocracy and why we should be looking into this more deeply. But of course, let me say that this is really something that we need to think about a lot. As you know, we are translating this into Italy. Italy is a place in which meritocracy is still some concept that is seen as innovative. We are a country in which we complain a lot about ourselves. It's not because we are humble, it's because we work like that. We complain. And one way of complaining is that our leadership, our power, our social system is organized on the basis of social relations. So is the friends of friends that go up, it's not those that merit to be in the leadership. So when we talk about meritocracy here, it seems to be the innovation, the way of creating a society in which capability and engagement and vision become the reason why people should go up instead of social relations and friendships and mafia kind of things. So you are in a country in which this is the context. How do you put the meritocracy criticism in a place like this?
Well, first, let me say what an honor it is to be in conversation with you about the tyranny of merit. And you've begun with a challenging question. We normally think of merit as a good thing, as an ideal worth aiming at, as an aspiration. And if the alternative to merit is corruption or nepotism or family connections, then the principle of merit is very attractive. It's attractive more broadly because we want well-qualified people to perform the social roles that they are good at. If I need a surgery, I want a well-qualified surgeon to perform it. So in this sense, merit is a good thing. So you raised the question, how can merit become a kind of tyranny? In the following way. We have to step back and look at what's happened in recent decades to our social and political life. Over the past 4 decades, the divide between winners and losers has been deepening, poisoning our politics, setting us apart. This is partly because of the widening inequalities brought about by neoliberal globalization. But it's not only that. I think it has also to do with changing attitudes towards success that have accompanied the widening inequality. Those who've landed on top have come to believe that their success is their own doing, and that they therefore deserve the rewards the market showers upon them. And by implication, that those left behind must deserve their fate as well. Now, this way of thinking about success arises from a seemingly attractive principle, the principle of merit, the principle that says if chances are equal, the winners deserve their winnings. Now, meritocracy, understood in this way, has a dark side. There are 2 problems, really. One problem is the one that you mentioned in setting the context. We often don't live up to the meritocratic principles we profess. But here's the philosophical question. Even if we did, even if we could establish genuine equality of opportunity, would that make is that it creates a society of winners and losers. The idea that the winners have earned and therefore deserve their success creates meritocratic hubris among the winners and creates demoralization, even humiliation, among those who don't succeed in rising. It leads the winners to forget the luck and good fortune that helped them on their way. And it leads elites to look down on those who haven't flourished. So this is my reason for suggesting that meritocracy can become a kind of tyranny by creating a society of winners and losers where those who are well credentialed, the meritocratic elite, look down on those who haven't flourished, and where those who struggle sense that looking down, sense that, and develop a kind of resentment that leads them to embrace an angry populist backlash against elites.
Yeah, the common good is really the topic of your book. We need to regain an idea of that, but we will come to that. Let me just discuss a little bit more about this question of merit. I would like to propose you 2 examples. One is Bill Gates is the person that I used to interview when he was in software. As everybody knows, he's one of the founders of Microsoft. He's been the richest person in the world for a long time, which is, another narrative, a completely different narrative as the merit. Today I was second little thing to comment. Today I was teaching my students in Pisa, and they and I asked them what should I ask Professor Sandel, and he said one of them they said, well, I was adopted, when I was very, very small child, I was in El Salvador. I had no future. I had the chance of this family that came there and adopted me and brought me to Italy, and now I'm in university. This is my second graduation. I'm very happy, and he is a great person. He's doing research and things that are amazing. So in these two cases, the narrative seems to be, unlucky. Uh, is it is it better to the rhetoric of merit or the rhetoric of, well, it happened?
These are two wonderful examples. I think the narratives they express come close to the moral perspective that I argue for as the antidote to the tyranny of merit, as an antidote to meritocratic hubris. What these two stories express is, I think, a powerful ethical insight, which is even those of us who work very hard, who expend enormous effort, should not assume that everything we're able to achieve is our own doing, the result of our own effort. Because there are lots of contingencies in life that make for success and for achievement. As your student and as Bill Gates expressed, there's the contingency of having the talents that enable one to succeed. But having this or that talent is not my own doing, however hard I might work to cultivate that talent. It's a matter of gift. And having the gift of being talented in this or that way is not something that I have done or achieved myself. More than that, the fact that the talents I happen to have are prized and valued and rewarded by the society in which I live, that too is not my doing. That too is a matter of luck. If Bill Gates had lived back in the days of the Renaissance, his talents for mathematical thinking, for software development, and so on, might not have gotten him very far. They cared more about fresco painters then than they did about software developers. Right place at the right time. That was his point. And the general lesson of these two stories is that being aware of the accidents and contingencies that enable us to succeed or to achieve can be an antidote to meritocratic hubris and can prompt a certain humility. The humility that says, there but for the accident of fortune or the grace of God or the mystery of fate, go I. And when we think this way, not only are we prompted to a certain humility, we are also open to a sense of indebtedness to the communities that made our success possible. Our indebtedness to family and teachers and neighborhood and community and country and the times in which we live. And from this indebtedness can come a greater tendency to think about what we owe in virtue of our indebtedness to other members of our society who may not have had as many lucky accidents as we. So in this way, an awareness of the role of luck in life can prompt a certain humility, which can open us to the possibility of a greater sense of solidarity and mutual obligation.
This is really something to think about. The lucky part of the narrative of Bill Gates, and it's not It's not random. It's there are causes of it. There are links. There are stories, and all these deserve our to be thankful for, and so we become humble, and that is the premise for solidarity and everything. So this is a really important point, and I think it's something to discuss. And one way to discuss it is to ask Professor Sandel if this kind of idea would change if we were discussing about this in China or in India or in a completely different cultural setting. I know he's been working on Chinese philosophy, and I wonder if this idea of a collective organism that seems to be more used in a situation like the Chinese cultural setting brings the same kind of ideas that he proposes for the American setting, which is clearly more adapt to this criticism.
There are certainly cultural differences that shape attitudes toward luck on the one hand and hard work and self-mastery as a source of success on the other. I have had opportunities to travel in China and to engage with scholars of Chinese philosophy on some points of similarity and some points of difference between Chinese philosophical traditions and my own work. The common thread takes as its point of departure, I suppose, that I've been a critic of the excesses of individualism and of individual sovereignty and self-making that are a powerful current in Western political philosophy. But I can't present myself as a scholar of Chinese philosophy, so I hesitate to generalize about it. But I do think that as a matter of politics and culture, there are different orientations to questions of how we succeed, how we achieve, and to what extent we are responsible for our fate. Part of the appeal of the meritocratic principle is not only that rewarding successful people gives an incentive for people to work hard. That's a practical utilitarian reason, but there's a deeper appeal to the idea of merit. And that's the alluring ideal that we can be free human agents and can determine our own fates, that we can be the masters of our destiny, that we are ultimately self-made and self-sufficient as individuals, and we can therefore exercise freedom understood as a kind of mastery. There is something deeply powerful about this idea, especially in the West, and perhaps especially in America, which often defines the American dream as the ability to rise thanks to one's own effort and determination. And I've argued against this way of thinking about human agency, but it's important to recognize its appeal. It exerts a powerful allure. And I think the only way really to challenge it and to persuade people to reconsider it is to argue, not to argue against freedom and human agency, but to show the idea of the self-made, self-sufficient individual human agent is flawed. It's a flawed conception of freedom. Instead, and this is implicit in the new book, The Tyranny of Merit, we need to embrace and to enact a conception of freedom that is not the freedom of the individual self-sufficient figure, but it's a kind of civic freedom, that we exercise human agency when we live in a society that enables us to deliberate with fellow citizens as equals about the collective destiny, having a voice, a meaningful say in the purposes and ends that we as a community should pursue. That's civic freedom. And it's a kind of freedom that depends not on an unencumbered, radically autonomous self. It's a conception of freedom that depends on seeing ourselves as situated, as encumbered, as indebted, and therefore as sharing in responsibility for the community as a whole. This gets to the idea of the common good. It's a notion of individual agency. It's a notion of human agency and of freedom bound up with our perception of human agency.
Place of self-quotations, but I've been writing a book that is called Homo Pluralis to say this, we're not individuals without links and dimensions that are communitarian and collective. And the civic media domain is the way in which we can respond to this in an interesting way. But we go to this. Let me just have another question on the pars demonstrans, which is about the conception of the definition of success. We can remember here in Italy there has been a very important entrepreneur of television that has become a prime minister with ideas that were very got a lot of consensus in Italy, and he stayed in power for 20 years. He used to say that success today has changed. He said, he's called Silvio Berlusconi, of course. He said, today we don't look for wealth or power. We need to seek popularity, because if you have that, then wealth and power come. So it seems there is a different, a setting in which success is about popularity. There is in Italy a completely different idea of success, and we have tons of many thousands of entrepreneurs, of people, or artisans, of craftsmen that, if you ask them, they always answered their success is to do things well, to make things that are good, that are made well. Like as if success was just to express the best of yourself.
Right.
These two ideas that seem to be very different one another, they live together in the same country. What is success?
Well, I like the second conception of success that you articulated far more than the first. And I should say that the notion of success as beginning with popularity rather than with intrinsic achievement, this has spread well beyond Italy, as you may have noticed with the rise of Donald Trump. In fact, it turned out when people looked into his finances, it's a myth that he became wealthy by building things. He became wealthy by being a television personality and licensing his image. That's how he made his money, not really by building things and developing things. That was the source. So popularity and really the cultivation of a certain image through the media was the source of both Donald Trump's wealth and power. So I think there is a powerful parallel here. And what it misses is the second kind of achievement that you mentioned, what I would call intrinsic, the intrinsic kind of achievement, making and producing and creating valuable things that may also give expression to the personality and creativity and imagination of the person who produces them. And this, I think, the distinction that you've drawn, I think is very important for understanding what's gone wrong with our public life and with our economy. Because the activity of producing, creating, building, making, whether in the form of manufacturing, well, there's the artisan ideal, which underlies the account you gave. More broadly, there's the idea of an economy consisting of producers who make things or perform valuable services that meet human needs. These are the intrinsic goods that an economy is organized to serve and to provide. But increasingly, the rewards in our societies have gone not to those who make and produce valuable goods and services that serve human needs, but the rewards have gone to those who have managed to manufacture the kind of popularity you've described, whether through the media or through YouTube performances, and to those who manage money. We've had a financialization of the economy that in some ways is parallel to the idea that popularity generates wealth and power, in the sense that it's at a distance from the real economy of goods and services, of making and doing in a way that meets important human needs. And so who are the figures who reap the greatest rewards in this economy? We could almost call it, I suppose, an economy of celebrity and finance. What celebrity and finance have in common is that they are ways of generating wealth and power and prestige without working. I mean, without working in the traditional intrinsic sense of producing goods or providing services that meet truly important needs. An economy of celebrity and of finance allocate power and wealth based on a kind of abstract contribution whose relation to the common good is at best tenuous. And I think part of what we need to do as a counterweight is to find a way to renew the dignity of work, the dignity of making and producing and doing tied to actual human needs as a counterweight to the economy of celebrity and financial speculation and manipulation that currently is the source of the most lavish rewards and wealth and power.
Yeah, and
what do you think?
I was thinking when you were talking about work, which is really, is the place in which dignity and our social role and our value to society are expressed, and it's important. The International Labour Organization has changed the definition of work. It's not anymore the activity that you are paid for. It's the activity that that gives value to society, even if it is not paid.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's very interesting. Um, but then we need to talk about value for society. What's
yes,
common good? This is
yes.
our major subject, and this is difficult to see in a context in which everybody has his own seems to be to have his own idea of what is common good. Um, Only one thing I think it's going to become really common good. And again, it's a student of mine today. I asked who is a successful person for them. And he answered right away, it is Federico Garcia, who has started a startup which is called Freedom. And they plant trees all over the world to
Hmm.
save the planet from climate change.
Right.
Climate change, the common good, climate change. It's the beginning of common good. I mean, we want to save us from climate change because humans can have a common good, can bring a common good to the planet. But this is the starting point for a lot of young people.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the focus on the common good and on the dignity of work go together and can provide a counterpoint to an economy of celebrity and of finance in the following way. But you raised just now implicitly the biggest challenge to a moral economy and a political economy that seeks the common good. And the challenge is that this requires that we as democratic citizens deliberate and argue and debate what really counts as a valuable contribution to the common good. For decades, the market triumphalist faith has taught us the opposite lesson. It's taught us that markets and market mechanisms are the primary instruments for defining and for implementing the common good. And we easily slide into the assumption that the money people make is the true measure of their contribution to the common good. But this is a mistake. A moment's reflection can tell us of many instances where the labor market's verdict on what counts as a valuable contribution is at odds with what most of us would agree is very important. For one thing, as you pointed out, many of the most important contributions to the common good, even to the economy broadly conceived, do not involve paid labor. What about raising and nurturing children and families? For the most part, this is outside the labor market, and yet no one would deny that this work constitutes an enormous contribution to the common good. Or take, even within the paid labor market, the vast disparity between the pay of a hedge fund manager and a nurse. The hedge fund manager makes 900 times what a nurse makes. Even the most ardent free market defenders would be hard-pressed to claim, I think, that the contribution to the common good of the hedge fund manager or the high-frequency trader is really 900 times greater than the contribution of a nurse. So we need to question the assumption that money or the labor market can define the value of social contribution. But here's the challenge, and it's the challenge that you referred to. This means that we as democratic citizens have to figure this out, have to deliberate about what really counts as a valuable contribution. And because this would require us to bring contested values into public debate. Because in pluralist societies, people disagree about how to value this or that social role. There's room for debate. And I think one of the reasons we tend to outsource our moral judgment about contribution to markets is we want to avoid these messy, contentious debates about values and how to value various contributions and social roles. But this hesitation we have, I think, is one we should overcome. Because outsourcing our moral judgments about contribution and value to markets does not decide these questions neutrally. It leads to certain outcomes deeply at odds with what our reflective judgment about value and contribution would suggest. So in a way, what I'm calling for is something that I suppose is politically ambitious, but I would say unavoidable, which is a morally more robust kind of public discourse than the kind to which we've become accustomed.
Absolutely. And I want to show our public this other book from you, is What Money Can't Buy, is of course about this kind of value that is not paid for but has a lot of value, social value and moral value and cultural value, and it's the sense of our life. Love is not for pay, for money.
Right.
So I mean, it's a really important thing that you're talking about, and debate, which is not deliberation, as of course is not this decision. Deliberation is looking what's the best argument, what's debating. It's debating
Yes.
about before decide. So having a good information and debate with our ability to argue and have positions, and this is of course something that people longs for, because when they look at your lessons, they are there for the nostalgia of a debate.
Right.
In a way. So how do we create a debate? I mean, it's the market has been for Hayek the way to decide, to inform, to decide, and it was an architecture that was not centralized as the communist solution. So it was a question of another era. Now we are in an era in which the internet is a place in which we can debate, but we don't. We just argue. We just fight. Or at least we do many things, but not debating better than in another situation. We have an opportunity there to build civic media instead of social media. But then Professor Sandel, the question of the question, how do we do it?
Well, it's a really important question, and I would attempt to answer it this way. First, the kind of civic debate we need would make for a richer kind of public discourse. What passes for political discourse these days, as you've suggested, consists either of narrow technocratic talk, which inspires no one, or where passion does enter, we have shouting matches, where people shout past one another on cable television, or on radio, or on the floors of parliaments. And citizens, people want public life to be about big things, including questions of values. What makes for a just society? What should be the role of money in markets in a good society? What do we owe one another as citizens? I think people everywhere are frustrated with the empty terms of public discourse because public discourse has been morally hollowed out. So I think this represents an opportunity. And I see this everywhere I travel. I think the reason people, especially young people, have responded in the astonishing way they have to the online lectures or when I do these interactive lectures around the world is that people are hungry for reasoned deliberation and debate in public about hard ethical questions that arise in politics and in our everyday lives. People are hungry for this. So how might we create more space for it? That's the question. Now, I think we have to do it in two ways. First, you made this very important distinction between social media and civic media. The internet does provide the possibility for a richer kind of deliberation, but for the most part, that possibility has not been realized because the internet has been commandeered in the service, essentially, of consumerism and celebrity and spectacle, all of which are antithetical to the civic project. So we need to create platforms for public discourse, and I would say even global public discourse. This is what's exciting about the internet. Being able to bring people together from different cultural backgrounds to deliberate questions such as climate change, immigration, equality and inequality, how to deal with the pandemic. I've tried to do some experiments along these lines. After we put my lectures on justice online and saw the response, I wanted to go further and see if we could use the internet and new technology for dialogue, not just putting out lectures, but for dialogue. And we've done some experiments with a series that I've done for the BBC called The Global Philosopher, where we link participants from as many as 50 or 60 countries and can see one another on a screen. This was before Zoom, but Zoom actually makes this easier. And take a question and debate it globally to see how people from different cultural backgrounds, different countries grapple with these questions of justice, inequality, climate change, immigration, free speech versus hate speech, and so on. So I think a lot more could be done to create civic forums, platforms for national and global public discourse, but it requires a deliberate effort and creativity and experimentation to see how best we can do it. That's one way. But there's a second way, which does not involve the internet alone. I think for all its promise as a platform for civic dialogue, the internet is not enough. I think we still need to supplement the internet with face-to-face community. I don't think we should give up on that. Historically, bringing people together physically, it's difficult during a pandemic, but bringing people together physically who share a more immediate common life in neighborhoods and regions and communities and even countries. I think this remains and will continue to have importance. One of the great losses brought about as a result of the widening inequality is that there are fewer and fewer class mixing institutions and occasions. There are fewer and fewer public places and common spaces that gather people together in person in the ecclesia, so to speak, but also within civil society. And this is because we've had a segmentation of society based on success, which is back to our theme of winners and losers. Those of us who are affluent and those who are of modest means increasingly live separate lives. We live and work and shop and play in different places. We send our kids to different schools. There are fewer and fewer civic public institutions, whether playgrounds, recreational areas, cultural institutions, public transportation, sports gathering places that bring people together. This is important because democracy does not require perfect equality. But what it does require is that people from different social backgrounds encounter one another, bump up against one another in the course of their everyday lives, because this is how we learn to negotiate and to abide our differences. And this is how we come to care for the common good. So in addition to creating civic media, which I think is very important, we have to supplement online platforms with common spaces and public places that bring people together in person, face to face. So this is a big project, but I think we need to work from both directions at once. Would you agree with that? What do you think?
I'm totally with you, and in person and online as we are now.
Yeah,
I hope
right.
absolutely to help this kind of project, and I'm sure that all the people that has been listening until now to this conversation will join the project, which is not only revolutionary, is also evolutionary. It creates completely new possibilities. I'm sorry, it's the end of our time with this conversation. You can go ahead and take a look at the book that we are talking about, which is The Tyranny of Merit, La tirannia del merito, di Michael Sandel. We had him here talking about the common good in a moment of history in which we look at very differentiated, this unequal society, and inequality seems to become, as Michael Sandel has said, seems to become division. It's no more just inequality, is division of society and fragmentation of society, people that don't encounter different kind of experiences, and the common good is having all these people together debating about their own future, and they can do it. It's possible to do it, and if you allow me, if we want, we can do it. Thank you, Professor Michael Sandel. It was an honor to talk to you, and I hope everybody will continue thinking about what you have just said.
Well, thank you. It's really been an honor for me to engage with you in this conversation, which I hope will continue when the pandemic restrictions fade away. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you and your students in Italy. But thank you so much for this.
Thank you.